I'll just come right out and say that bullet hell games aren't usually my go-to. I've played some of the big ones, Enter the Gungeon, Risk of Rain. I own a steelbook copy of Nuclear Throne, but have yet to actually play it, so I'm no bullet hell expert or anything close. Mainly because, generally, for the most part, I'm just mediocre at these kind of games. I don't think I ever passed floor 3 in Gungeon. Barely played Risk of Rain a few years ago. They're not bad games, far from it. I see the positive reviews and the praise that these games have gotten and still continue to get. I just usually fall out of this genre because of progression. I play games for loot, for items and collectibles, and character progression that continues throughout the entirety of a game without being wiped clean every 10 seconds because of some roguelike mechanic that bullet hell games tend to have. With all that being said, Archvale is a bullet hell game that just released recently. I've been waiting for it, and now having played through it all, it's something truly special and a hell of a good time. Pun very much intended, because it's the only kind of jokes I have. If you're in need of a game to satiate that craving for loot, Archvale's got you covered. Let's talk about it. First off, I'm going to get sidetracked for a bit, but for good reason. This will make sense in a minute, just bear with me. There's a reason for my madness. For a method for whatever the saying is. Jared, just stay on script, you sound like a fool. There's an indie game that released back in 2019 called Forager that's kind of like an open world, pixel art, survival crafting game filled with tons of bright colors and characters, a real feel-good game that has addictive progression, fun gameplay, and strangely satisfying audio. There's also a game that's relatively newer and in early access right now called The Slormancer, essentially a pixel art hack-and-slash dungeon crawler with tons and tons of loot rarities, build crafting, items, progression, a game that I also recommend and think will become something immensely good as time goes on. I bring these two games up because if you took Forager and you took The Slormancer and threw them into some soup and mixed them up, you'd get an almost perfect best of both worlds 5-star meal called Archvale. This game nails almost every single goal it sets out to achieve, so much so that I could not stop playing, went complete no-sleep gamer mode, and almost beat its roughly 13-hour runtime in one single sitting. It has challenge with multiple difficulty settings if you want to pull your hair out or play it safe. There's colorful visuals and loads of different biomes, way more than I was personally expecting to see, some of them quite surprising that I won't spoil here. Quirky characters and varied enemies that are unique to each biome or dungeon, all of them having different patterns of attacks or bullets that you have to learn and maneuver around or time your dodges to avoid. And the bosses, man, the bosses are truly epic and some of them are really, really tough. It has combat that feels responsive and powerful, which I'd argue is one of the most important things to get right in games. The audio design plays a huge role in this. Every hit, every attack, every explosion feels powerful thanks to the audio and visual cues. The soundtrack is on point and utterly fantastic. The joyful song that plays in the snow biome is super catchy and was stuck in my head for a few days. And there's tons of items to collect and craft. From armor to weapons, you find badges, extra hearts, attack and defense boosters, chests that contain loot, there's loot rarities, all the stuff us loot lovers like to see. Context aside, at the end of the day, we're here to talk about the loot, so let's just get to it. First off, we've got loot rarities. Base items are white, then you've got green, blue, purple, yellow, orange, lime green, red, then rainbow. Lots of rarities, the more the merrier in my opinion, and Archvale's got a whopping 9. Now, although these are rarities, I wouldn't necessarily say that anything feels rarer than something else for the most part. I think the colors more so represent power progression, so you have a better understanding of what item is better than another. Rarity takes a back seat in Archvale due to most of the loot coming from crafting versus coming from random drops from enemies. Most towns or safe hubs in the game have an anvil where crafting takes place, and you're able to craft weapons, chest pieces, and helmets of each quality as you progress and find new materials. Different crafting materials are found in each biome, and once you obtain a new material, new recipes requiring it will appear at the anvil. Once you get further in the game, some recipes need actual items that you can only get randomly from defeating a specific enemy. These items tend to be the most powerful in the game, including the weapon I ended up using during the final boss fight. You can also find gear randomly from defeated enemies or chests that are out in the world. That does happen once in a while, but 80% of the time, the gameplay loop consists of fighting through a biome, collecting new materials, finding upgrades, which we'll talk about in a second, teleporting back to a hub to use those new materials to craft new armor to help you stay alive in the current biome or the next one coming up, rinse and repeat, with a few other things like challenge rooms, dungeons, puzzles, and boss fights thrown in. Fun. That sounded sarcastic, but it wasn't. It's actually fun. As far as gear slots go, you're able to equip a helmet, a chest piece, and a ring, while also having an entire hotbar full of weapons to scroll through mid-combat. Most helmets, chest pieces, and weapons can be crafted, but there are a few of each out in the world you can only get from enemy drops. Rings are also only found from enemies or from chests. There's also a merchant that sells some of those unique drops once you discover them and progress enough in the game. You purchase these items with gold, of which you find just by playing, and you can use this gold also to enhance your weapons. So if you find a specific one you like, you can up the damage on it at a blacksmith. As far as item stats go, Archvale is very simple and easy to understand. Armor has defense numbers and typically 1 or 2 added bonuses like damage increases for the combat types in the game, ranged, magic, and melee. You can get bonuses to power, which is just overall damage, protection buffs, which give you protection hearts or attack speed increases, rings offer up strong damage or defense bonuses, and some late game rings just straight up give you new combat techniques, like an ice shield when dodging or a steady increase in power the longer you go without taking damage. And the best way to not take damage is to kill your enemies as fast as possible, and you've got a plethora of weapons to use to go about doing just that. You've got swords, axes, wands, staffs, codexes, flails, spears, bows, crossbows, weird things like a launcher that looks like a bumblebee for some reason, and my personal favorite, boomerangs. Each weapon has its own range, rate of attack, damage obviously. Some do poison, bleed, or fire damage, some slow your enemies, some lower enemy defense, and some have armor penetration. There's a good bit of variation here, and with the ability to slot tons of weapons in your hotbar at once, you can try a lot of them out at the same time without having to worry about making the right choice, and you can also just throw every cool item you get into your vault to save to try later, or to save just because you're a collector like me, because I pretty much only used one weapon type over the course of the entire game, the boomerang. I love the boomerang in the demo, I love it in the full game, especially the very high rarity ones. So we went over armor, rings, weapons, crafting materials. What's left? Upgrades and badges. Throughout the game, in various locations and in dungeons, you'll come across health upgrades that increase your total health, potion upgrades that give you an extra potion charge, plums that increase how much health you get back from a potion, attack and defense bonuses, and bomb upgrades which increase the damage of your bombs, an ability you get early on in the game. You also can find badges. Badges work as passive buffs that enhance your abilities, means of survival, damage, or just give you new things entirely. You find these badges from big chests, challenge rooms, and dungeons. How do they work? Well, you have a certain amount of badge slots, and each badge takes up a different amount of those slots. These badges are where character builds come into play. There's almost a badge for every type of playstyle here, no matter what kind of weapon you're using, and by the end of the game, if you've purchased all the badge slot increases, the 9 total slots gives you a ton of options to put together some interesting and fun builds. Badges can be equipped and unequipped as many times as you want. There's no cost to equip or anything like that. You have the full freedom to experiment with what works well together. I frequently switch between 2 builds to get through the majority of the game, one for boss fights that dishes out maximum damage while also debuffing the boss, and another that just made me a thick boy tank with all protection hearts and a defense bonus for each protection heart I had. Probably my favorite build so far. I've only unlocked 35 out of the 40 badges because the few I have left are locked behind challenge rooms, my least favorite part of the game by a long shot and my only gripe with Archvale as a whole. Challenge rooms, simply put, are challenging rooms where you only have one life. The goal is simple: you stand on a small platform and you just have to dodge everything while collecting the floating crystals. Get enough of them and you get a checkpoint and move on to the next, usually more difficult round. After 3 rounds, you get a chest with a badge. The problem here is that these things suck. That's literally it. I can't sugarcoat it. I had such a bad time with these rooms that it legit just killed any mood I had and made me want to stop playing. I don't get frustrated much when it comes to games, but I certainly had a few moments where I banged on my desk in anger after getting hit for the 400th time trying to complete a room for almost an hour. What's even worse is that every single badge I obtained from the challenge rooms that I managed to complete by some god-given miracle, literally, I sometimes had to slap myself while playing to make sure me completing one of these rooms wasn't a dream. I'm surprised I don't jolt out of bed during the night in a cold sweat from having nightmares about these challenge rooms. Anyways, I never used a single badge that I got from these things, and they are such a vibe killer that I just started skipping them without even attempting them once. These would be 20% more worth it if you had a choice between 3 badges or something at the end. These would be 100% more enjoyable if they just didn't exist. Throw those badges into a random drop pool, that way there's always a chance you can obtain them from any enemy as you play. That would be dope. Problem solved. As much as I ranted for probably a bit too long on that, it's mostly a minor issue with an otherwise really fantastic game that I recommend you go buy if you are a fan of the bullet hell genre or just need that loot fix. There's going to be more Archvale content on the way that adds more to the game, so if you do plan to play, just know that more stuff is being developed. Big thanks to iDoz, one of the devs of Archvale, for kindly providing me with a key to the game. I'm sorry this video took me so long to make. I had a bit of a content identity crisis, if you will, throughout the development of this video. With that being said, the editing, scripting, and overall style of this video is a bit different, more polished, more professional, maybe, I don't know. Let me know what you think. I've been wanting to upgrade the quality of my videos for a while now, so if there's anything you like, didn't like, or maybe something you want to see more of, let me know. Go buy Archvale. It's out now. It's on Xbox consoles, PC, and the Nintendo Switch for $15. Steam link is in the description. It's also on Game Pass, so that's a steal. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more legendary loot news, as well as a 10% increase to Magic Find. You're welcome. Jared out.